Welcome to another OU Insider Under the Visor Sooners podcast. My name is Brandon Drum. I'm here with Parker Thune. And, you think that it's going to get a little dull and everything's going to settle down. The coaches are out evaluating. The staff is done with the transfer portal. Not so much. Or in the words of the great Lee Corso, not so fast, my friends. I needed to have a pencil in my hand when I said that. But a number 2 pencil, by the way. And Jermaine Lole, who was the first to commit outside of Bronson Hickman during the spring game, has now decided to flip to the University of Texas. We're going to dive into all of that. We're going to dive into what Oklahoma is going to do to try to fill that void. If you're on OU Insider, you already know, or at least what their plan is. Find out here in the next 24 hours or so. By the time this release, it could be out already, to be honest. But if you're watching, we can give you the backstory to all of that right here, or at least not everything, because that's for members, but a little bit of the backstory for you guys that need to know that. Oklahoma got a commitment from 4-star Carl Albert, OK Preps, Rivals 250 cornerback Tristan Haynes, and obviously the coaches are out on the road. There are official visits being set and talked about. So there's still a plethora of stuff to talk about. Oh, and by the way, you Mavs fans, I'm giving you a scowl just for this few weeks. Scowl. After that, we all come back on the same side, because there's nothing that splits the fan base, Parker, like an Oklahoma City Mavs playoff series. I realized that on Tuesday. It's crazy. My timeline is like split. OU fans are just griping at each other. It's fun. It's fun. And for everybody that wants to know, Parker does not care. Parker
No,
is
I
from
do not.
Nebraska.
I'm just sitting here watching all the chaos unfold. I'm like, I could not care less how all of this goes down. Whether
I'm
the
glad you said
Mavs
could
win,
not.
whether the Thunder win, whatever happens, you couldn't pay me to care about the NBA. I follow it very, very casually. Very casually.
It's that
And
Omaha in you.
I did not watch game 2 last night.
Well, I kind of wish I didn't.
I figured as much. I figured as much. Brian Clinton stayed in my guest room last night, and he came back at close to midnight. Was like, that did not go as I expected. He was at the game.
But he called it. He tried to get me to go to the game with him. And I was with my kids down there at that little event, and we went the game before, and I was like, I can't go without my kids, and my wife would kill me because they love the Thunder so much. So, that sucked. But I bet you that was the first game he had been to, and since OKC was just starting the rebuild, so I'm sure that atmosphere was off the hook for him. Because
the only Thunder game I've ever been to was pre-COVID. It was the Chris Paul year.
Well, those were good years. Yeah. That was a good year. But I'll say this. If you've never been to a playoff game, and I'm telling you guys right now, go. There is, and everybody in the NBA will tell you this. The Mavs fans said this when they walked in to the arena there. They're like, this is another level of intensity, because it's like a college atmosphere. When they get on a run, everybody's on their feet screaming. You got 20,000 fans just pouring down on you. It's fun. It's a blast. But that's neither here nor there. What is here nor there is Jermaine Lole going to the dark side.
Yes, indeed. That was completely out of left field. Did not have that on my bingo card when I woke up on Thursday morning. That news conveniently dropped. Travis Davidson and I were sitting in the KREF studios over on the east side of Norman, about 10 minutes to showtime, and we were remarking to each other, man, there really isn't anything that's just screaming at you. You got to lead the show with this today. But lo and behold, 5 minutes later, the news of Jermaine Lole's flip dropped, and that provided a very convenient lead. So we'll dive into all of that in just a second. Want to remind you, though, first off, that this edition of the OU Insider Under the Visor podcast is brought to you by Manscaped. Are you ready to soak up those summer vibes and unveil your ultimate beach bod? Well, you're in luck because our friends over at Manscaped have you covered from head to toe. With the Performance Package 5.0 Ultra, this ultimate all-in-one grooming kit is set to have you looking and feeling your best in the summer sun. Embrace your summer bod goals with our all-inclusive Performance Package 5.0, perfect for those aiming for that crisp, clean, and confident look. The updated Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra Groin and Body Hair Trimmer got a summer makeover. It's waterproof, designed for splashy pool parties and beach hangouts. And you can keep your ears and nose as tidy as your hedges next door with our Weed Whacker 2.0 Ear and Nose Hair Trimmer. Pesky hair, be gone. And post-trim care never felt so good with the Crop Soother Ball Aftershave Lotion. So you can say goodbye to painful chafing and hello to all-day comfort. And the Magic Mat disposable shaving mats got your back and front and everything else that needs grooming. It's like having a magician in your bathroom. And your purchase comes with free Boxers 2.0 Midnight Bravo, comfort and style that fit like a dream. You can get 20% off and free shipping with the code OU Insider at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping with the code OU Insider at manscaped.com. The summer sun is here to stay, so trust Manscaped to keep your pubes at bay. That's all.
Okay. There, I
was wondering. I was waiting to see whether you were going to be able to keep it together after I read.
I was because I was texting.
You were prepared for it, huh?
Oh yeah. Well, the last time caught me off guard. This time I was like, I'm not going to pay attention to the pubes at bay.
Not going to break character.
I'm gonna stay focused. All right.
Jermaine Lole.
Yeah. Well, I was about to go there, and so the funny part is I'm on my timeline yesterday. I'm watching OU and Texas fans actually gripe about Jermayne Lole. Texas fans were hating on Lole. OU fans were defending Lole. And every OU fan was like, yeah, he's a second or third rotation guy for Oklahoma, but that's a good second or third rotation guy.
Sure.
Texas fans, on the other hand, were saying, no, it's not, blah, blah. And then the flip happened. And you watch Texas fans talk about how great this was. The same people that were hating on him, how great this was. And by the way, they've completely wiped all the negative Lole stuff that they had prior to that. Because I went back to look at their mentions and their comments, and they were gone. So
I bet they were.
So it was funny. And then there were people hating on me for saying that Lole was. At no point in time have I ever said Lole was not a second or third rotation guy. I said he is a great second or third rotation guy. That's exactly what he was. He was a great filler piece for Oklahoma in games because Oklahoma rotates defensive tackles so often to keep them fresh.
Yeah.
And so having a guy like that was so big for Oklahoma. So anybody that says this didn't suck for OU is clueless, number one. Number two, OU is pissed, like very pissed. Let's go back into why they're pissed, because they didn't in home with him last week. Last week it was Brandon Hall and Todd Bates that went out to California. Didn't in home with him. Everything was peachy clean. Everything was great. A surprise official visit took place because, to begin with, Texas started throwing money, because the thing is like with nobody's going to top Oklahoma, or at least I don't want to say ever, because that would just be stupidity and naive of me to say that with Jonah Williams, but it's going to be very hard to top Oklahoma. And if somebody tried, as far as Oklahoma's already gone in that scenario, another $100,000 or $200,000 is just, it's a drop in the bucket at this point. And so, and by the way, he is not seven figures, just so everybody wants to just make that very clear to everybody. He is not seven figures. But to that point, I think what happened, or not, I know what happened. There was a couple of things that happened. One is just miscommunication. Two is when Texas starts offering money, he turns it down to begin with, and initially says, I'm staying with Oklahoma. He takes a visit and still turns it down to Texas, right? So this is at the beginning of the week. Well, he goes and they offer him more money. And they bring it back to Oklahoma this time. And Oklahoma's just like, mm, mm, yeah, we're going to go try to get somebody else if you're going to do that. But not in the sense of they wanted to let Lole go. They just kind of said, look, we were the first on you. Texas is now like trying to dig because and this was kind of the selling pitch that Oklahoma had. Texas was trying to dig on um missing out. Them LSU just kind of whiffed on a bunch of defensive tackles. And so Oklahoma's point to the Lole family was, I mean, they had nothing to do with you until just recently. And so, and they may have recruited him when he first got in the portal at a very, I guess, casual level, but Oklahoma came in hard. They pushed hard. They got Lole on campus. They got the commitment. It was done. It was over with. Everything was agreed upon. So to that instance, Oklahoma's pissed. So it wasn't a good deal that this happened. Now, luckily for Oklahoma, there is a player out there right now that has similar traits, that has similar upside, that has maybe even more. I would not even say maybe, he has more of an upside than Lole, and that's Brandon Lane. But Oklahoma had already kind of, when he got in the portal, I believe they'd already kind of had Lane in their, or Lole in their sights, right? So, Lane also had to stall out on visits. He had to stall out on a lot of things because he was working on graduating. So that also worked in Lole's favor with Oklahoma during that portion of the process. And so Oklahoma instantly turned, they pivoted, and now we should find out. You may already know if you're watching this and this comes out on a Friday afternoon, because we're recording this Friday morning, or maybe he waits till Saturday, but Sunday, Lane will be on a campus of his choosing between USC, LSU, Oklahoma, Minnesota, and Colorado. And those are not programs to scoff at by any stretch of the imagination. You got five Power Four programs, excuse me, and three of them are blue bloods in the world of college football. So you got a kid that went to South Dakota State, transferred down to Stephen F. Austin, and became a really, really good. Those are two of Parker's favorite G5 programs, by the way.
What's that now?
South Dakota State and Stephen F. Austin.
No, I was about to say,
I've seen you in South Dakota State.
That's a former Jackrabbit, baby.
Yeah,
I'm all
I've
about
seen you in
it.
the South Dakota State shirts, but I thought
almost
you had an
went
SFA
there.
shirt.
I almost went to school at South Dakota State.
There you go.
I still pull for him. Brookings, South Dakota. It's an awesome campus. If you ever get the chance to go up there, it's awesome.
Yeah,
different vibe than Oklahoma, naturally. Much more intimate,
colder.
There's a stark difference between a Power Four environment in that sense and an FCS environment. But I love Brookings, South Dakota. Love South Dakota State. So I think this would probably be like, if the Sooners were to land Brandon Lane, I can't think offhand anybody else that would have played at both South Dakota State and Oklahoma. That'd be a first.
Josh Heupel?
No, Josh Heupel didn't play at South Dakota State.
Did he play at South Dakota?
No.
He's right. I know he played at Weaver State, but I thought he went
Snow Junior College and then
Weaver State. Okay, so he transferred. Gotcha. That's well. I thought he went to Weber State, then Snow Junior College.
Maybe that is what it was, Weber, and then
Yeah,
no,
because back then you couldn't transfer from school to school without sitting out. So, um, yeah. So, anyways, on the Lane situation, I kind of feel like Oklahoma's going to get a visit, but I'm not going to sit here and confirm that. He made it very clear to me yesterday. That's one thing I will say is that he is not going to take a bunch of visits. He said I'm choosing one or two schools. He says it's hopefully two schools. I'm taking those two visits and then I'm going to decide because I do not want to go through this process again. He goes, I've been through it. I don't need to go through it. I'm a better player than I ever have been. I'm bigger, stronger, faster. I'm smarter. I understand the game. I understand NIL, and I'm not willing to jeopardize anything over small details. I want to get to where I want to be and I want to get started. And to me, that screamed Oklahoma when he said that, by the way. Just does it not? Does it not scream Oklahoma when you say that? You talk like that?
It's admittedly, and I know he played up at SDSU, which is not that far from Minnesota, geographically speaking. But it's kind of hard to take Minnesota seriously alongside those other four schools that are in the picture.
No doubt.
I would imagine he's going to see through the mirage that is Colorado, because it is a mirage and it's become more and more obnoxious by the day. So realistically speaking,
our comments just got really heated. Thank you, Parker.
If the Colorado fans find that comment, whatever, come at me. I'll fight that battle all day long. You have the most pompous head coach in the entire Power Four. And that's hardly up for debate at this point. But USC and LSU would seem to be on paper the two schools that OU is fighting with. And obviously,
desperate.
Well, they beat out LSU for Dominic Williams. You'd figure that similar to the Jermayne Lole situation, LSU would be willing to pony up a little bit more for a guy like Brandon Lane based on what happened with Dominic Williams. But again, that's apparently not how Brian Kelly does business. So who knows? We know USC will make promises. Whether they will follow through on those promises is another matter entirely. But we know they will make promises. So it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. With regard to the Lole situation, I think two things can be true at the same time and not be mutually exclusive, even if they sound as though they may be. A, Germaine Lole is a good football player who would have played rotational snaps and had a role for Oklahoma defensively. And B, it's not that significant of a loss either. And the fact that Texas's backup plan for Dominic Williams was going and bagging Oklahoma's other transfer defensive line commit, it's like, okay, whatever. OU got their guy. They got Dominic. They got the guy everybody wanted. They had Jermaine Lole. Obviously, they wanted Jermaine Lole. You hate to see Jermaine Lole walk, but by the same token, that is not the crippling blow to your defensive tackle depth that it would be if Texas had been able to land Dominic Williams or he'd gone to LSU or Missouri. You are significantly better at defensive tackle with Dominic Williams on board. You would have been marginally better with Jermaine Lole on board, but Oklahoma is much better at defensive tackle as they were before the post-spring window. And they had initially pulled off the sweep. They got all three official visitors that were here at the spring game committed. They got Dominic, they got Jermaine Lole, they got Branson Hickman. And I think at that point, and I had commented even before Dominic Williams was on board, I feel like Oklahoma's okay. With or without Dominic Williams, I think if they don't land him, they're still going to be fine at defensive tackle. How much more okay are they minus Jermaine Lole and plus Dominic Williams?
Yeah.
That's a transaction in which Oklahoma got the better end of the deal. And even so, like, when you try to flip a kid like Jermaine Lole, if you're in Texas's position, and I get it, it makes sense from a business standpoint for those guys, because if you have if this is the last addition you're going to make to your roster before the season, and you have X amount of money just sitting there, and it's not really going to go anywhere else unless you unload it for a defensive lineman, well, then you can afford, literally and figuratively, to overpay for a defensive tackle at that point. And I would argue there is no shame in it whatsoever. If you have that money, you might as well spend it.
Yep.
And certainly it makes sense to try and flip the guy that is committed to your rival, because that's something that your fans can feel good about. It's something they can take a victory lap over. Okay. Like, from a business standpoint, it makes a lot of sense.
Sark is stuffing him in a locker, right?
That's exactly.
That's what I read.
But consider this. And we know that part of the pitch that Texas made to Lole was, hey, you're going to get more snaps here than you will at Oklahoma, which is true. But in that statement, there is an acknowledgement of inferiority, Brandon. What you are saying, albeit not explicitly saying, is that our defensive tackle room right now is worse than Oklahoma's. And that's why you're going to play more.
And that was one of the selling points that Texas made. Like, they made that pitch over and over and over to him over the last week or so. And it became clear at that point, I think particularly to Lole, that, yeah, I'm probably going to get more snaps at Texas. And have the turntables turned, in the great Michael Scott words of wisdom. And the fact that you look at Oklahoma and their defensive tackle room, and we've been talking about this all spring. Like, if you're going to go get somebody, you're going to go get somebody elite.
Yeah.
To add to that locker room. They obviously, Oklahoma wanted a depth piece, right? And a good depth piece like that. Lole was going to be a fantastic piece to Oklahoma's defensive line. That is without question. And that is where the sting comes from, right? Because now you got to go grab somebody else. And luckily for Oklahoma, there is somebody else out there that you really, really liked and that you kind of had on the same level as Lole when they entered the portal, but he wasn't as far or ready to go down that, that rabbit hole of taking visits and stuff because of graduation in Brandon Lane. So Oklahoma's kind of lucked out there as far as that goes. They have to close the deal, though. They have to get him on campus on a visit. Otherwise, you just end up empty-handed. But on that same note, so you miss out. Let's say you miss out on Brandon Lane, and you're just going to go in with what you've got. What you've got's pretty dang good.
That's what I'm saying. And like, if you get Brandon Lane, great, but it's gravy. It really is.
And you got Devon Sears. You have Marcus Strong, who had a fantastic spring and looked pretty good during the spring game that we watched and the other practices that we watched. Obviously, you have Jaden Jackson, who's going to be a major piece. Oh, by the way, there's this guy by the name of Dejon Terry that started for you last year that's also back, that set out the majority of spring. And you got this guy by the name of Dominic Williams, who's been all Big 12 back-to-back years and was a freshman All-American at TCU. So you're going to be all right.
And the thing I'll add, Brandon, and we've talked about this. This isn't a novel observation.
That's nose tackle, by the way. I just want to
certainly.
I'm not even talking about D tackle.
We've mentioned this before on the podcast. It hasn't been mentioned a whole heck of a lot elsewhere. The big X factor to me is Grayson Halton, because he has played such good ball at times over his first 2 years at Oklahoma. And he seems to be the one that gets lost in the shuffle when we're having the conversation about the defensive tackles, or I should say when folks in general are having the conversation about the defensive tackles, because obviously you know who the two freshmen are. I mean, they made their statements throughout spring ball. David Stone, Jaden Jackson, they both had tremendous, I guess they both shone in spring camp. Yeah. I don't know whether they're going to be, I don't know how much they're going to play. I don't know how much, they're going to make a legit impact year one. I still feel like we need to tap the brakes on those guys just a little bit because they are young, but undeniably they have proven that they belong at this level and that they are immediately capable of giving you quality snaps. If it's 10 snaps a game, great. If it turns out to be 30 snaps a game, awesome. But I guess as long as we keep the expectations modest for those guys, what is undeniable is that the promise is very high. The potential is very high. You have two proven commodities in Dominic Williams and Dejon Terry, and Grayson Halton to me is the guy that if he is a dude as a junior, if he takes a similar leap sophomore to junior year as he did freshman to sophomore year, he's the one that can really help solidify that rotation.
And here the crazy thing is post 2024, let's say Dominic Williams decides to return. And that's a big if. Let's say he wants to become a first round draft pick and he is a day 2, he's a second, third rounder after this year, which he's not yet, but that's what you kind of feel is he's trending in that direction, I guess is the best way to put it. Let's say obviously they're going to have Jaden Jackson back. They're going to have Grayson Halton. They're going to have David Stone. You're going to have Marcus Strong. You've got 5 really good players to start off with. Oklahoma will go grab a portal defensive tackle. They will. And at this point, you can't really count Oklahoma out on anybody because they're going to pay. And particularly for defensive tackles, mind you. And I would venture to go out of the limb and say DNs and safeties and offensive tackles and offensive linemen. I think that's been kind of what opened our eyes the spring portal with Bronson Hickman he got in the portal and Oklahoma was what everybody, kind of put him towards, right? But he had anybody he wanted to go to because he was, I believe, the 3rd highest rated offensive lineman in college football last year, according to PFF. So when you have a guy like that get in the portal, people are clamoring for a dude with that talent. And Oklahoma went out and they got the job done. And so you kind of, at this juncture, feel like that's where things are trending with the collective and the NIL with Oklahoma. If they got to pay, they're going to pay.
Yeah.
Just to make sure their roster's set up. And they're doing that with guys on their roster, by the way, too. That's why it's more than doubled as far as how much they pay per season. So you have those 5 pieces. You're bringing in the 25 class that could be just another extraordinary defensive line class for Oklahoma. You feel really good about the future at that point. You feel like things are, and we're not even talking about Danny Okoye. We're not talking about Nigel Smith. Like, we're not talking about Wyatt Gilmore. We're not talking about everybody else they return on that defensive line. They're going to be just fine. And I think that's kind of big picture, which what I've kind of noticed more than anything else is like, yeah, Dominique Williams was a huge piece to be brought in. Brandon Lane would be another big piece to bring in for Oklahoma as far as rotation goes and being able to come in and compete right from the start. But you look at it and you go, man, like they're going to be just fine no matter what moving forward because of what they've done and how they've built that. And I think that's, to me, is the big picture piece that I think some people are kind of overlooking a little bit of how well this thing has gone for Oklahoma on the D line and defense in general, because they're so used to the offense getting whoever they want. And that's still happening. Like, you're still getting the pieces on the offense that you need and that you want across the board. Granted, 2025 offensive line is big. Like, it's so vital that they land a few of those guys. They've started off really good with Foj. Obviously, they got Owen Hollenbeck. And who's the other one that I'm missing?
That's all right now. It's just Foj
That's all.
Hollenbeck.
Okay. That's all right now. I would venture to guess that at some point in May, they're probably going to add to the offensive line. So you got those three. Now you got to go close on the big dogs, like the big dogs, right? Like the 5-star top 100 guys. And if you can do that, I think fans in general will be really, really happy with everything moving forward, because how could you not be, right? And on that note, Parker, Tristan Haynes. Tristan Haynes committed to Oklahoma this year. And it seems like it was completely looked over now because of what happened with Lole. It went from cool, Tristan Haynes committed, to crap, lost a defensive tackle in the portal. So, and it's it kind of stinks, because that was a really good get when you look at the size, you look at his speed, you look at his length, you look at his upside. I mean, what Belay and Brandon Hall have done to that back end of that defense has been on the same level as Bates.
Yeah, and I think
Chavis.
I think we tend to focus a lot of our attention towards the defensive line because the SEC is a line of scrimmage league, as Dusty mentioned last week when he joined us on the podcast. And I think naturally, when Oklahoma's recruiting well on the defensive line, it tends to command the headlines. But it really has flown under the radar to an extent. I don't think people are completely oblivious to it by any means, but I really don't think what Oklahoma has done to transform the secondary in the last 2.5 years gets enough run in the news cycle, especially with a guy like Tristan Haynes, Brandon, who could have gone anywhere. He had Alabama, he had Georgia, he had Notre Dame, he had Miami, he had Oregon, Texas A&M. I mean, you name it. He had every big offer in the country. And he was kind of the one guy that we talked about amongst the Carl Albert quartet in the 2025 class that you kind of worried about him getting away. You know, he kind of knew Marcus James was going to come along and be a Sooner. Got the same feeling with Janae Washington. Kevin Sperry was locked in even before he got to Carl Albert. But Tristan Haynes kind of seemed for a while there like he was on his own wavelength, and there was some steam behind the Notre Dame buzz, and he was planning on taking 4 official visits, and he was going to get down to Miami. I think it TCU that was kind of quietly in the picture. There were a bunch of schools that felt like they had a legit shot with Tristan Haynes as late spring approach, and we got ready to flip the calendar to the summer. And then lo and behold, he visits Oklahoma for the spring game, and boom, that's that. He's a Sooner.
Yeah. And the funny thing is he quietly had already made a decision that he was going to commit at the spring game before he even showed up. So Oklahoma had laid the groundwork. They kind of told him, look, it's first come, first serve, because Cortland Guillory is going to commit when he gets here. So you either need to hop on board while you're here, or Kobe Sellers is probably going to take that other spot. And quickly you started realizing that Tristan Haynes, at least that was a feeling that we had when he showed up, because his name to begin with was kind of a surprise, right? Like, I know he had told me that he was going to be there when I went to see him. Oh, it may have been 7-8 days prior to the spring game. And at that point, the evaluation period had just kind of started for everybody. And then I saw him shortly after the spring game. And so what kind of clued me in that things, first off, we had heard there was multiple defensive back commits, and we had dug around and kind of sniffed around, but nobody at Carl Albert, nobody within the camp would kind of admit it until I got to Carl Albert, and everybody face to face was like, feel pretty good about Tristan Haynes. I was like, okay, that's all you got to say. And so I talked to Tristan while I was there that day, and Miami had just left. And I said, are you going to OV Miami? And he goes, probably not. And at that point I go, okay, but you still have visits you want to take. He goes, oh, if I decide to take all my visits, I'll probably take 3 or 4, That's what I'm going to do. I said, so what happens if you commit prior to that? Because you keep saying you're going to commit soon, like the date's coming down the pike and all that type of stuff. He goes, then I'm probably not going to take any visits other than the place I'm committed to. And I said, say less. You don't have to say any more.
Mm-hmm.
I understand what's going on. Don't even say any more to me because I don't want you to feel uncomfortable. And that's literally how our conversation went. And he was like, I appreciate that. And he goes, some things are better left unsaid. And we kind of went about our own merry way. And I called you when I left. I was like, done. And 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 so we kind of had a feeling about it, but about 3 days prior to it was the day that he put out the announcement, like the little partial commitment video thing. He had texted me. He said, come up here tomorrow and you can do all your interviews you want with me and we'll take care of this. So that's how we got all that stuff. And I thought the interesting thing is that he had said that other schools came up between the spring game, OU spring game, and the commitment, and had like really started pushing, like A&M, Miami, I believe even Georgia and all them like came by and they were really pushing hard to get him to come in on an OV, and he had to look him square in the eye and said, pretty solid with Oklahoma. Time for me to kind of shut things down, coach. And so that obviously Carr always become a pipeline to Oklahoma. Now, the next time Carl Albert has 5 guys on their roster that are OU level will be surprising at once.
Sure.
But still, to get all 5 from one school, that's the stuff that we used to see in other states like Florida when the Gators would get 5 guys from Lakeland, and like Texas would get everybody from obviously like Travis or Austin Westlake, like those type of things. But it's never really happened at Oklahoma that way. So this I think is a new little it's just a good deal for Oklahoma because it's kind of a first time that's taken place, right? Like I can't remember the last time there's been that many dudes on one team. Just go, yeah, we're all just gonna go to school together.
I'm not old enough to recall, but what about
Maybe at
Jinx?
yeah, Jinx and Union days back in the day, maybe, but I can't remember him having that many. I know they had at one year they had like Corey Collins, they had the defensive lineman, I think Corey Klein. There was like 2 or 3, but I don't remember there being 5.
Yeah,
of one team. That's a lot.
That is a lot, undoubtedly. And Oklahoma would have loved to have had Kobe Sellers. Let's not get that twisted. And
No
as
doubt.
we sit here, we're on the eve of his commitment. The full expectation is that he's going to be a Texas A&M Aggie. But Oklahoma would have loved to have had Kobe Sellers. They prioritized him for over a year. They made him feel the love. It looked for a long, long time like he was going to wind up in the class. But at the end of the day, as you said, the spring game rolled around and Kobe Sellers wasn't ready to jump on board. Tristan Haynes and Cortland Guillory were. And I don't think you're going to quibble, Brandon, with 3 blue chip corners between Haynes, Guillory, and Malik Hawkins, all of whom are 6'2" and are very much SEC type of bodies at the cornerback position.
Yes.
You walk into the SEC, you want to have cornerbacks who are technically sound, who are good in both zone and man coverage, and guys who are not going to be physically overwhelmed by the demands of going up against some of the most gifted wide receivers in the country. And Malik Hawkins, Cortland Guillory, and Tristan Haynes, man, that is a dynamic trio for Jay Valai in the 2025 class. Would it have been nice to have had Kobe Sellers? Sure, but getting Kobe Sellers means you wouldn't have gotten one of those 3 guys. And I think especially for the fact that those 3 guys were all willing to jump on board before OV season rolled around, and they're all in. They want to be Sooners. They've embraced this program and everything that it's about. You're not going to be looking over your shoulder at the end of the cycle going, man, what if we had Kobe Sellers? I think you're very, very pleased. I know Jay Valai is very, very pleased with this haul.
So The other thing that I've kind of I guess it kind of started last year. It's almost become, it's kind of like the spoiled fan base type thing, right? Like the expectations there now. Like Venables shows up, you have the number 8 class in the country. The very next year in 2023, you have the number 6 class. In 2024, I think they ended up with 7. I think they were 7, right? Something like that. And 6, 7, 8, something like that, right? Oklahoma's ranked 4th.
Yeah.
And nobody is talking about that. Like that is like kind of it's kind of glossed up. And I know it's early. I get it. It's early.
That's really all it is. It's just early.
But still, like I remember when Muleshoe was here and Oklahoma got the 2023 class started off hot, and they were like far and away the number 1 class in the country with everybody that they had gotten commits from, right? They got Ty Lemon, they got Malachi Nelson, they had Brandon Ennis, they had, and it was ridiculous. It was ridiculous. It was like all like of the 6 commits, 4 of them were 5 stars, and the other ones were top 100. It was an insane class. It was insane. But everybody was like, oh my gosh, look at this, look at that, because it wasn't something you saw on a normal basis with Muleshoe's recruiting. Yes, they got top 10 classes. Never going to dispute that. But they weren't recruiting at the level across the board, both sides of the ball, the way BV and his staff are recruiting. And I think that has become an expectation, and it's become to the point where if Oklahoma doesn't have a top 7 or 8 class, it's a disappointment.
Sure.
It is. It's a disappointment at this juncture.
I caution anybody against putting too much stock in the recruiting rankings this early in the process, because I mean,
True.
you look back 2022, Oklahoma was sitting somewhere in the 30s at this point. We know how that class ended up. They were number 6, number 7 in the nation by the time it was all said and done. So there'll be programs that rise. There'll be programs that scuffle a little bit on the recruiting trail as summer arrives, and certainly as the football season rolls around. But I think what is impressive, Brandon, is that camp season is coming around here. We're probably 3 weeks out from Oklahoma's first Brent Venables football camp. And in each of the last 2 years, there's been a couple of camp season guys that weren't really on the radar for Oklahoma in the recruiting cycle, but that came to camp and earned the offer and wound up in the class. In 2022, it was Josiah Wagner and Keon Brown. Those 2 guys that they weren't really on the radar for Oklahoma until they showed up to camp. Well, they were on the radar, but I guess they weren't on our radar. We weren't really expecting those guys in the class till they showed up to camp, really popped off, enjoyed their time on campus, and boom, they're both locked in before the end of the month of June. Last year was Ivan Carrion and Dozie Ezekama. Obviously, one of them didn't last, but when Ivan showed up to camp at the beginning of June, it was a big deal. Everybody knew who he was, because how many 6'6" dudes from West Texas make their way to an Oklahoma football camp? Everybody knew he was committed to Texas Tech. He has, he's just got a very recognizable face too. And so even if you didn't really know who he was, if you showed up to that camp, you're like, oh, wait, I know him. I vaguely know who he is.
Yep.
And then he winds up getting the offer and winds up flipping to Oklahoma by the end of the month. And I think what's most impressive about the work that Oklahoma has done in this recruiting cycle, Brandon, is that you look ahead to camp season, and it's pretty much solely going to be about 26 and 27 guys, because the Sooners have 15 commits right now. They will probably have 17 or 18 by the end of the month of May. And at that point, you have 75% of your class in place. There are not going to be many, if any, late evals, camp evals, 25 players that earn the offer at camp and get invited for an official visit. All of the pieces are either already in place or very much lined up for Oklahoma in the 2025 class.
I concur a little bit. Now I'll never say never on that, because somebody comes and they just completely show out, and you go and you look at the film, they're like, oh wow, how did we miss this guy? And how is everybody missing on this guy? This guy's a stud. Or somebody's a late developer, all that type of stuff. But I think the other thing outside of the camp season part is what's left for Oklahoma. I think that where they're ranked now and what's left on the table is what is so crazy because you've got just insanely highly rated guys still left to go and you're ranked fourth. If you close out on 2 of those 5-star offensive linemen, which every podcast, I swear to you, dude.
Nobody who's listening on the audio only side has any idea what just happened. But if you're watching on YouTube, Brandon made some hand gesture that I suppose prompted Zoom to release virtual balloons all around his face.
And it's happened. I think this is like the 4th or 5th podcast in a row that's happened. I don't know what it is, but all right. Anyways, you have those offensive linemen. You have obviously Jonah Williams. You have Amarian Robinson. You have the wide receivers. You have the defensive tackle still on the board. You have the tight ends still on the board. Like, so you still have a chance to even bump yourself up into the top 2 or 3 if you end the way that you hope you're going to end. And I think that is probably, to me, that's probably the biggest piece of this puzzle. Now, I wouldn't get my hopes up too much on several of those guys, but we've said that before, and OU has proven us wrong. Official visits at Oklahoma tend to change the tide. You want to know who we're not talking about enough that we have completely glossed over. We've mentioned him a few times on the board. We've mentioned him a few times on the podcast. Isaiah Gibson, committed to USC, top 100 player in the country, defensive end, edge rusher, taking an official visit to Oklahoma on June 21st, which will be his last official visit. He's visited Oklahoma once on an unofficial visit. He was supposed to come again and it got canceled. If you are USC right now and you see he's got Georgia, I believe Oklahoma, I can't remember who the other one was. Is it Ohio State?
He's got some big OVs on the schedule.
Yeah, he's got big OVs.
I think he's taken 6 too. So it's a pretty healthy OV slate. But that's one of those guys, Brandon, that isn't necessarily all over most folks' radar right now.
Yep.
With Oklahoma, that could very well provide a significant boost to Oklahoma's eventual rankings at the end of the 2025 cycle. A couple other guys that fall in that same category for me: Darius Afalava, the number 1 prospect in the state of Utah, going to be OVing June 7th through the 9th. There's reason to feel good there. I don't know if there's reason to feel confident yet. A lot is going to happen. A lot is going to depend upon what happens, not only at his Oklahoma OV, but on his other OVs. He's taken quite a few of them as well. So jury's still out on that one, but there's definite reason to believe he could end up in Oklahoma's class. To me, and we've reported on this at OU Insider, it hasn't been touched on a whole heck of a lot elsewhere. OU's in a real good spot with Quincy Porter. National top 100 wide receiver out of the state of New Jersey. That's one I'm keeping an eye on heading into OV season in a big way. Him and Andrew Marsh both, but I think, if I had to handicap it, Emmanuel Choice, I have him pretty much penciled in as Oklahoma's 3rd wideout in the class. The 4th one could be Marsh. It could be Quincy Porter. It could be Caleb Cunningham. I think Porter has the highest odds of that group to wind up in an OU uniform. But it's pretty crazy, right? That Emmett Jones has 4 uncommitted top 100 wide receivers in the country coming in for official visits at the end of June. And that's not really getting talked about a whole heck of a lot right now. That's Emmett Jones for you, though. That man's a maniac in the recruiting game. And then the other one, and again, I know we have talked about him at OUinsider.com. I have not seen his name connected to Oklahoma a whole heck of a lot elsewhere. But Cade Petjack from North Dakota is a 3-star right now. Make no mistake, he will not be a 3-star by the end of the cycle. That kid is good. That kid is good, and he very, very much likes Oklahoma. And that's a very real thing right now between Petchak and OU. And granted, you're only going to have, if CJ Nixon wants to come along, you're only going to have one other edge spot, and it could be Petchak, it could be Isaiah Gibson, it could be somebody like a Smith or Rogbo. Maybe you're able to turn the tide with Max Granville. There's a lot of different ways that all could turn out with regard to the third edge spot, but Petchak is the guy right now that I would say probably has the highest odds to occupy that spot. And again, if you land him, he'll be a 3-star when he commits, probably, because I don't think there's another massive update coming that will elevate his ranking between now and when he decides. But by the end of the cycle, that's a 4-star dude that ought to be in the top 250. Whether he is or not, that's out of my hands. I mean, I would have said the same thing about Michael Boganowski last year. I did say the same thing about Michael Boganowski last year. He wound up a 4-star, wasn't a top 250 guy, but I think much like Boganowski, get Petchak on campus, and he's somebody that is going to very immediately prove that he belongs. And I'm real high on Cole Breeler, man. I love me some Cole Breeler. I think he's going to be a dynamo.
I agree. I'm very much distracted right now because I want to cry just from happy tears.
What
the
is
college
it?
football 25 art, the cover art just came out for the game. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Do we have a release date?
Yeah, July 19th.
July 19th? Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I just
It is upon us.
So the guys they have OU on there. And it's a guy wearing like 81 or 31 or 11 maybe.
Let me
Something
take a
like that
look
with the
here,
hand up. Yeah, go ahead.
and we'll see
Go
if
ahead
I
and
can
get in the
identify him.
group text.
Is that
So,
OU?
yeah, that's OU.
Yeah, I
The
guess it
Jordan
is. You
gloves.
can
Jordan
vaguely
gloves.
see the.
Yep. And the logo. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But you got Ewers, you got obviously Edwards from Michigan, who was almost a Sooner. You got Travis Hunter. Ewers was almost a Sooner. I mean, if we're gonna be honest.
Was he? Was that a thing?
Oh God, yes. Did you know it was OU or Texas at one point, and because of Rattler's season, they chose I believe because he was 2022, right?
He was
At the beginning,
originally 2022, and then he reclassed into
class of
2020.
2021, right? So because of Caleb Williams
Ah,
and Rattler, he chose Texas, flipped to Ohio State, goes to Ohio State, comes back to Texas. But yeah, initially, like he was dang near almost committed to Oklahoma at one point. Um, they got Jalen Milroe, Travis Hunter, uh, Junkins, Carson Beck, um, and then a bunch of other people from Oklahoma, Notre Dame, uh, Washington, Oregon, Clemson. Like the helmets Florida, like the visible helmets are the ones that you would expect, like Alabama, Oklahoma, Georgia, Florida. Like those are the ones you would expect. Ohio State, um, to be at the forefront of the cover. So yeah, pretty cool deal. Pretty cool deal. But I digress. That was just
you
totally.
do indeed digress.
I do very much so. But I think that's a topic that everybody likes to talk about because it's been so long. Everybody loves the 2014 game. It's been so much so that everybody's redone it, right? Like I have the redone version, the revamped version.
Let
So,
me ask you something, and this is
but
genuinely a question out of ignorance, because obviously I'm going to have to get a new
Xbox,
gen.
do it.
I'm going to have to get a new gen console, which I've
Xbox,
never owned in my life. It's
Xbox.
Xbox and PS5, right?
Right.
That's
You want the
coming out.
Xbox One. Yes. The
Okay.
one
Well,
X.
my
You want the One
question
X.
though is there compatibility between the two
Yes, you can
consoles
play
such that
cross. Yes.
okay.
Nowadays you can cross most games are cross-compatible online to play versus each other.
Okay, so somebody else has a PS5, I have an Xbox One. I can
Yes,
play.
you can now do that. Unless they're like, it's like Spider-Man or The Last of Us, or I can't remember what the Xbox games are. There's certain ones that are exclusive to
Gotcha.
certain consoles, but ones that go on both consoles, they make explicit crossplay. And I know fans are like, what the hell are you guys talking about? All right, back to recruiting.
I had a PS2 back in the day, so I'm probably going to gravitate towards the PS5.
That's fair. I was a PlayStation guy there for a long time as well until I got an Xbox 360 and I had a PlayStation 3 at the same time. And for some odd reason, I just kind of gravitated towards the Xbox after that. Anyways, now back to the defensive end topics and the recruiting topics.
I have a
Let's talk
question for you.
about. Okay, before we do that, real
Quick
quick,
interjection. Have you treated yourself yet? Have you watched Cade Petjack's tape?
I have not watched his tape
Boy,
yet.
you'll enjoy it.
Okay, I will do
It's
that
fun.
when we get off here. Yep.
It's fun.
I imagine he dominates because of where he lives. I
He
mean, he's
dominates, but it's not because of where he lives. It's
really
because he's a freak show, man.
okay. I will go watch Pet Shack after we get out of here. But let's talk Jonah Williams.
Okay, let's.
Everything that everybody, national guys, reputable national guys, are putting in picks for him to Texas A&M. Again, in the words of the great Lee Corso, not so fast, my friend, because I can sit here and tell you that Oklahoma is still squarely in that thing. It kind of felt like they were fading, which they were among several other schools. It felt like A&M was just about to look. What A&M is doing on the baseball field has been better for them than any other aspect of this recruiting. Like if it was going strictly off of development of players and putting dudes in the NFL, you're not going to A&M. Just stating the facts, not trying to be a jerk. If you want to put the two programs up against each other, fan bases, go ahead and do that. If you're an A&M fan, it's not going to be pretty.
Well,
and as far as NFL development goes.
And to that point, I think the reality of the last several years is, and I'm not saying this is going to be the case always. I'm saying this is the narrative that Mike Elko and his staff have to reverse. Over the last few years, A&M, quite frankly, Brandon, is the school where 5 stars go to die.
Yeah.
It's the school where 5 stars go to die or go to transfer.
Okay. So you've more solidified my point
of
where I was heading there. And in a very what did Dusty say the other day? About saying things in a very tight and concise manner, something economics.
Yes.
Is it word
economy of words.
Economy of words is how you said it. And so I'll just say this. The OU baseball program, Skip Johnson, is going to make this thing interesting. I believe from what I've been told, he has decided to take on this venture himself to make sure that he is in with the family. Obviously, the OU football staff has been balls to the wall recruiting that, the 5-star safety. But now that the baseball season is kind of winding down a little bit and they're getting a breath of fresh air a little bit. They can come up and they can really start focusing in on some recruiting again. I was told that Oklahoma is about to do their thing there. And I will be shocked if he doesn't take an official visit to Oklahoma. Now, you also have to understand that Oregon's set up on the 21st, I believe. He's got one to A&M. He's got one to Ohio State. He's got one to USC. Those are the programs you look at and you go, okay, How is Oklahoma going to fit in that official visit? No window. Somebody's going to probably get left out. If it's Oklahoma at the end of the day, it is what it is. They're going to go with Amari and Robinson and push for them. At one point in time, I was told that it would be hard to take both. I am now being told Oklahoma will swing for the fences and take both if they can, because obviously some pieces have left. They aren't as far over the scholarship limit as they once were. I think they're only 2 at this point going
87.
in. Yep. So I think they feel pretty good about all of that and the fact that there's going to be some more attrition at the end of the year. So it is what it is. Oklahoma is going to try to pull both. I think they have a good chance to pull both. I know for a fact that Amari and Robinson and Oklahoma are in a pretty good spot. But, you got to close the deal. And what teams are doing right now is they're using Oklahoma's depth against them and the fact that they've recruited. So they're using Brandon Hall's recruiting acumen against him and the fact that he's built such a strong safety room. But
yeah, why would you go play for this guy? He's too good at his job.
Yeah, see, that's the thing I was kind of get at was that kind of backfire. It's been backfiring a little bit on these other programs, particularly with Amari and Robinson. Oklahoma is still looked at as the leader there, but they got to hold that.
Sure.
Come official visits, that can change. And with Jonah Williams, it's been a question with him. Like from what I've been told, has been looking at depth charts, has been checking things out, has been seeing, who's here and who they're recruiting there and this and that and this and that. And there are programs out there that are using Oklahoma's strong recruiting against them for Jonah Williams. But from what I'm told, Oklahoma has done a good job combating that at this juncture. We'll see. I still kind of agree that A&M has kind of taken Oklahoma's spot as the leader, but it's Oklahoma's still right there. Oregon's right there. Ohio State's right there. And when you look at those other 2 baseball programs, Oregon particularly and Oklahoma, they're both top 20 baseball programs. They both produce a bunch of major league guys. And is Jonah Williams going to end up playing baseball at the end of the day over football come draft? I think that's the other question you've got to look at. So there are still a lot of questions to be answered, and we're going to find those out over the next month and a half, 2 months. So there's that with Jonah Williams.
Yeah. And to me, I think it's going to be maybe not all telling, but pretty indicative of where things are headed if Jonah Williams isn't willing to budge on one of his OV dates for Oklahoma's sake. Because, and we know like Oklahoma has had some success in getting Amari and Robinson to back down from taking that Oregon OV at the end of June. At least on that date. They haven't had as much success with Desan Brame in that regard.
Nope.
And if you're taking a look at Brame's recruitment right now, it's not that hard to put 2 and 2 together and figure that everybody else is going to have a hard time pulling him away from Dan Lanning and the Ducks, because it's the Oregon OV June 21st through the 23rd, commitment on the 29th. So when the schedule looks like that, you know that heading into OV season, you got a mountain to climb if you're not that school that's getting that last OV.
Oklahoma losing out on Nate Roberts was, to me, kind of the death knell for Desan Brame because they're such good friends. So they like to play on the same 7-on-7 teams. They seem to pick the same tournaments to go play for said 7-on-7 teams. They talk every day. And when Nate Roberts chose Ohio State, it felt like that mountain that Oklahoma was looking to climb to get to Desan Brame went from the Arbuckle Mountains to Mount Everest at that point. So, I mean,
that's about the sum of it.
Yeah, it just did not seem very, very good at that point, and that's where it stands. I think that ought to do it, man.
Yeah, that's about it.
Pretty information pieced, lots and lots of information on this podcast. If you're not a OU Insider member, though, there's so much more information over there than there is on this podcast. Like, we don't even scratch the surface 99.9% of the time of what you'll get here over there. And it's worth it. We have also added some other good informational pieces in former national title winner, former OU wide receiver. Damian Mackey is now on the OU Insider staff. He just posted a piece today. There will be a lot of information that he has with his 10 thoughts after every game. They're gonna do a podcast once a week for OU Insider. So if you're not subscribed right here to this channel, you will miss out on that. Or you can go look up Barry and Mac show, which is on any platform that you listen to on the podcast, and download that, subscribe there, or subscribe right here to OU Insider, and you'll get it all one-stop shop with ours. Brian Clinton and Jesse Crittenton, the Oklahoma drill. You get the Barry and Mac show. You get the softball information. You'll get the basketball information. All that's right here, right here. Or if you want to know and be in the know behind the scenes, you go to OU Insider VIP, OUinsider.com. Sign up right now, $9.95 a month or $99.95 for the whole year. Get you all the way to whatever date you sign up into 2025. And again, it's worth it. There's a reason why we've been growing so fast. The number one reason is because you guys are such awesome OU fans. We can't thank you guys enough. But please help us hit 15,000 subscribers right here on this channel. I think we're on like 10 away. We are shooting for 17,000 by the season. So if we can get to that juncture, that would be awesome. We're shooting for 20,000 at the end of the year, which I think is a very doable thing. But that's all up to you guys. You guys are the best fans in the world, and we hope that you guys give us a shot. We're also looking to add we're talking about some other ventures underneath the OU Insider umbrella as far as podcasts go. Let us know in the comments, Parker. Parker and I have talked about it. Would you like us to find some SEC podcasts, put their people together on one little platform where they can sit there and debate, the week of in the SEC, football, basketball, softball, baseball, that type of podcast as we move forward? If you guys will be interested in that, let us know in the comments. And yeah, I think that's going to do it, Parker. So for Parker Thune, my name is Brandon Drum. We will see you on the next podcast. Have a blessed day.